This, you're going to learn, we're going to go through, when you assemble this block, if you do it on a bigger scale, it's just what we do when we assemble an on-point quilt, which I'll show you when we get to the quilts that I normally show you. And so it's a great skill to have. There is a skill builder out there. Michelle is filming this class also that we will put out there, so that if you need help after the fact, you'll be able to get it. But it's a really fun block to create, and I think once you get the concept of it at the end of the year, if you want to do an on-point quilt, you'll find it pretty easy. So the cutting numbers are odd, and it's important on this first one, you keep the sizes straight. So the first thing you're going to cut is two 1 3/4 inch strips, and each one you're going to cut into 2 4 3/4 inch pieces. We don't normally do 3/4, but we are here. Then you're going to cut two 4 1/4 inch squares, and then you're going to cut a 4 3/4 inch square. You're going to take the two 4 1/4 inch squares and cut them on one diagonal. So you have 4 triangles. And if you look, they're going to be the outer triangles here, okay? Color number 2, it's very simple. You're gonna cut 8 2-inch by 4 3/4 inch pieces, okay? So you're gonna stack those up. And then the smallest background piece ever we've ever had, you're gonna cut one 7 3/4 inch square, and you are gonna cut it on both diagonals. And that's these setting triangles. We talk about setting triangles all the time, and that's what those are, okay? Make sense? We're gonna start easy. You're gonna make your rail fence blocks. So you're gonna take the 2 by 4 3/4 yellows and the 1 3/4 by 4 3/4 main print, sew them together to create a rail fence that will measure 4 3/4 inch square, okay? That's the easiest part. Then you're going to sew them on each side of the center square, making sure that the center touches the center, okay? So you will end up with, just rip this out, try to stay a little more organized, a piece like this, okay? So the next part is how we construct the block. Now, if you look at this and you look in the block, it goes like this, okay? So we're kind of building this on an angle, but it's going to turn out square. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take the remaining two 4 3/4 inch rail fence blocks, and you are going to sew a triangle on each side, which is up there. You're going to make 2 of these. Now, the way you know how to line this up is that you are going to align the bottom edges. Your extra triangle, or your point, or the wing we call it, is going to stick up above. Now, notice how they're more than 1/4 inch, right? I'm having you cut these pieces slightly larger than they need to be, which in turn means when we get to the end, you're going to need to trim this block. Because when you do things on point and you're working with bias, we all know how things get distorted. And whenever I do a quilt on point, I always cut these and these bigger than they need to be so that I can square it up when I'm done, okay? So you're gonna make 2 of these, and then you're gonna come back and you are going to add 1 of these on top of this. The most important thing here is centering this triangle on this center rail. And I have a little Tula trick for that, if I can find my pieces again. I'll just show you the slide, how's that? So if you fold your block right side together and your triangle wrong side together and crease them, you will have the 2 pieces have a ditch that fit together, and you know you'll have them centered. Does that make sense? So you're going to fold the block right side together, the triangle wrong side together, press and crease this, where the center is, and when you go to line them up, those will just tuck right into each other. That's a tulip pink trick that I saw, and I thought that was ingenious. So I'm giving her credit for it. But that when you when you sew that on, then you're going to end up with this centered over this. If you want, you can pre-trim these wings off to be even with the block. That's perfectly acceptable, okay? So what we're gonna do next, and it is one more slide down. We are now going to sew those two triangles. So here's our center, and now we're going to, let me hold it up, take this and your finished triangles, and you're gonna put those right sides together along the long side. Now, you can use the same trick for the center, but this one is kind of nice because you have matching seams on each side. So you don't have to really worry about it. If you match your seams, you should be fine. And you're going to sew one of these triangles on each side of that center piece. So I'm gonna lay this on here so you can see it, okay? So we're almost there, except I need my triangle there, okay? Except there's still something missing. So when you sew this, we're almost there, but it's not square yet. To make it square, we are missing something at the end of each of these. So you are gonna come back and take a triangle and sew it at the end here and at the end here. And it's kind of like, well, I don't understand how this is now gonna be square, but look at the magic. We've got that sewn on, and if I rotate the block this way, it is square. And that's how you get your block, okay? So if you've ever made a non-point quilt, the concept is exactly the same. This just happens to be a mini quilt, a block, okay? So if you wanna, look, so this is an on-point quilt, and look, if you see, here is the center row, it's got 2 additional rows, and then you've got this right here is that big triangle that we just sewed on, okay? And then, so you've got this one, and then when we come over here, this one is already sewn. Here are your remaining 2 end triangles. Exactly the same as what you're doing with this block, just more blocks, okay? You remember that at the end of this year when we go to make quilts, and you get we tell you what the yardage is to do an on-point quilt, okay? There are a ton of charts out there that says you determine the size of this and this based on the finished size of that. So in our case, this was 4 and, no, and if we were making the whole quilt, it would finish at 12. In our case, our little block is 4 1/4 because it's finished at, well, unfinished it's 4 3/4. There's also calculators out there. I use the one on Quilter's Paradise, where you plug that number in and it comes back and it tells you what size to cut the square to get these and these. And then I always add a little bit for safekeeping. All right, any questions? All right, so this is what it looks like if you sew 12 of them together. Look how cool that is.